Welcome back to the Fallen Giants rebuild here on Super Sammy Plays. After our best campaign yet, we've got European football to contend with this season. Our first time back in the Champions League since the 04-05 season, we're looking to continue progressing in our rebuild of Deportivo La Coruña. But before that, Manchester United were trying to take our star player and had matched his release clause with a bid of 70 million. So, will he stay or will he go? Let's get into it and find out. With all players in our squad and now over that 6'2" height requirement, we weren't planning to do much business this summer. And that's nothing to do with the fact that our transfer budget was just 500k. But like I just said, at the end of the last episode, Manchester United had matched Elmala's release clause, so our first priority was just try and get him to stay. But when we spoke to his agent about potentially signing a new deal, he weren't remotely interested. And just 5 days later, he signed for United in a £70 million deal. So not exactly the start to the transfer window we were looking for, but at least we now had some money to spend, right? After the season we had, it was no surprise that there were interest in some of our players. This time it was Endor drawing attention. With a release clause of just 13.5 million, it wouldn't take much to take him off our hands. So I did the sensible thing and offered him a new contract, so at least if he did leave, we'd be heavily compensated. He was happy to stay though and accepted, with his new release clause being a much more substantial 44.5 million. And behind the scenes I've been cooking up a little surprise as well, as we confirmed two new signings both on free transfers, a new left-sided centre-back in Oliver Profstegard, as well as bringing Everton striker Tierno Barry back to Spain, who I was expecting big things from. Although we now had a decent pot of money to spend, I decided to continue the theme of cheap signings and youngsters rather than just one big name marquee transfer. So with that in mind, I made an offer for Brazilian youngster Felipe Guerreiro, matching his 7.25 million release clause, as well as trying to bring back the man we had on loan last season, Josh Achampong. Unfortunately, Achampong decided to go to Atleti instead, leaving us still in need of a wing-back, but we did at least confirm youngster Guerreiro. He's not ready for the first team yet, but hopefully with some development and maybe a loan or two, he'd be a big player for our future. And after getting turned down by one of our loanees from last year, I decided to make a move for the other. Freeman was listed for transfer at just 4.1 million, and this one went much smoother, with him signing just a few days later. And although we'd already signed a striker this window with Barry, I decided to make an ambitious approach for another. Darwin Núñez was available on a free transfer. At 30 years old, he still had a couple of good years left in him, so I went ahead and offered him a contract. But unfortunately, we just couldn't reach an agreement, so I weren't willing to blow our wage structure on him. Ironically, he later signed for Jeonbuk, with his wage certainly a lot lower than what we offered. It all worked out for the best though, as after a brief trial for another out-of-contract striker, we ended up offering a deal to former Chelsea youngster Mark Guéhi. And yes, I'm aware that's not how you say his name, but it's how I'm going to say it, so deal with it. His demands weren't too far apart from Núñez's, but at 23 years old, he should only get better and maybe eventually bring in another huge transfer fee with his release clause set at 90 million. It's fair to say the board were happy with this one, and understandably so. With Guéhi coming in, we moved on one of our current strikers, with Adacheri leaving for FC Twente in a £325,000 deal. I then turned my attention back to signing players for the future with offers for three young defenders. Firstly, Argentine centre-back Nicolas Vallejo, who at 6'7" was my type of centre-back. Great stats in marking, tackling and heading, just needed to work on the other technicals. Next up, Bjorknes, who maybe didn't look quite as good as Vallejo, but were the punt for his personality type of model citizen. And finally, Osorio, a Colombian right wing-back with a release clause of just 1.2 million, whose profile I forgot to click on. At least I remembered to when we actually confirmed the deal. Decent personality type and resolute, and some really good physicals. He's gone back on loan to Junior FC, who we signed him from, to continue his development there for the rest of the season. We also confirmed the signings of Vallejo and Bjorknes, as well as the sale of 29-year-old centre-back Comas, who had agreed to join Mallorca for 850k. With all of the transfer business done and some nice new additions, I was looking forward to our first game of the season, as for the first time in this save, we were actually ready for it. Not that the media prediction expected much from us this season, and whether we were ready for the season or not, it made no difference as we lost on the opening day to Cordoba. Our next game at least went a little better, with Ndor opening the scoring in the 40th minute before Mambwa and Makama combined twice in the last 10 minutes in a much improved 3-0 win. And like I mentioned at the start, we have got Champions League football for this season. And I have to admit, it felt like we'd been nice with the fixtures, so there was at least 5 winnable games in there. However, I was keen to see how we'd fare against Juventus, Bayern and Chelsea. Back to the league though, we had a tough test in Sociedad up next, so I was delighted when new signing Mark Gui got his first goal for the club, getting on the end of Manwa's cross to give us a 1-0 lead. Gui then provided for Makama with a cheeky flick off the chest for the second, before Gorat Sategi scored from outside the box to pull one back for Sociedad. But just 9 minutes later, Manwa got his second assist of the day as his cross found Engels, who headed home to wrap up a 3-1 victory. We followed that up with a boring 0-0 draw against Villarreal before losing away 1-0 to Girona. And if you're new here, I can't show you that as their stadium crashes my game with the 3D Stadium mod. But it was time for our first Champions League match, and one that I expected us to win as we faced Swedish side Malmo. It took us a while to get going, but we finally opened the scoring as Manwa continued his excellent start to the season, providing another assist for Makama. And Dor then showed why there was so much interest in him in the summer, as he added a brilliant second, scoring from range to wrap up the perfect start to our European campaign. Before our next league phase fixture, we had a tough test in the league, with Atleti coming to the Riazor. But just 10 minutes into the game, Engels played a wonder pass over the top to set Makama through and goal, and he coolly tucked it away to give us the advantage. But 3 minutes before half-time, Barrios' effort from the edge of the box somehow went all the way through the crowd to find the bottom corner and level the game up. And in the 45th minute, the turnaround was complete as Almada slotted home to make it 2-1. Any chance of getting back into the game shrunk just a few minutes into the second half when Mamba was given a straight red card for this challenge on Simeone, which I can't blame him for, as I'd love to do the same. But unfortunately, he got the last laugh as the game finished with the scoreline 2-1. Not exactly the ideal prep for our next Champions League game against Sporting Lisbon. Even less ideal when Luis Suarez scored the only goal of the game in the 9th minute as Sporting won 1-0. And even more less ideal, if that's even a thing, was the fact that we were playing Barcelona next in the league. And even more, no, I'm kidding. But we did go 1-0 down in the 19th minute with a goal from Bernal, before just 2 minutes later, Yamal doubled our misery as he added a second. Makama gave us a glimmer of hope with a tidy finish to make it 2-1, but it was nothing more than a consolation, as Fermin's cross shot was prodded home by Yakuba Minta to restore Barca's 2-goal lead, with the game ending 3-1. Not exactly the start to this season's campaign I'd expected, with us sitting in 16th place after the opening 7 games, having won just 2. The next month at least went a little better, firstly starting with a 1-0 victory over Sevilla, with Engel scoring the only goal, followed by another 1-0 win, this time over Valencia, with Ndor assisting the winner in both matches. Next up was the first Galatian derby of the season, and this one took a while to really get going, with the first goal coming in the 64th minute, courtesy of another tidy finish from Makama. But not for the first time, Mamba made things difficult for us as his horror tackle resulted in the second red card of the season, leaving us to play the final 20 minutes with 10 men. Again, not for the first time, it cost us, as Celta Vigo got back level through Liberale before he added another just 2 minutes later to seal the victory away from us. Panathinaikos were our next opponent, and another of the games I pinned as winnable when the fixtures were announced. Mamba was doing his best to make up for that red card as he assisted twice, before Engels scored twice himself in a 4-1 victory. Back to the league, and we beat Elche 2-1, with goals from Makama and Gui, before hot-headed wing-back Mamba followed El Mala in dropping a bombshell on us, stating he was considering leaving for a bigger club. I suggested we had some fantastic youngsters and he should give them time, thankfully, to which he agreed and decided to drop the matter, for now at least, anyway. After a much better run of form, winning 3 of the last 4 league matches, we were now sat in 9th place, and things were looking much better than this time a month ago. That was until we dropped points with the score draw against Racing de Santander, conceding a 90th minute equaliser before drawing again, this time in the Champions League against Juventus. Sharing a point in this one turned out to be a great result though, as Pedro and Conceição had put Juve 2-0 up, before Barry scored a brace to get us back level just 4 minutes from time. Back to La Liga now, and things weren't getting any easier with our next opponents, Real Madrid. And they've actually lost count of how many goals Engels has scored in this exact fashion, but I weren't complaining either, as he gave us the lead. Conrad Loma's cross somehow ended up going all the way through to Vinicius Jr. as he got Madrid back level before they completely turned the game on its head, beating us 2-1. We then made it back-to-back losses with a 1-0 defeat to Valladolid, prompting this message about how the squad weren't happy with my management. We dropped back down to 13th in the table, and Captain Cups weren't happy, suggesting we were underachieving in the league. However, looking at the squad dynamics page was certainly an insight into why we'd been so poor, with a number of issues disrupting the squad. I did try and address what I could straight away by offering Comenencia a new deal, but the rest would have to wait. Bernasconi then thought he'd pile in, wanting first team football, which is funny considering he was happy to sign a contract as a squad player. And with all this going on, it probably weren't the best time to be playing Bayern Munich. Or maybe it would be the perfect catalyst in getting everything back on track, as Barry's header gave us an early lead in just 4 minutes. However, we were brought back down to reality when Aslani got Bayern back level before getting onto Kimmich's pass to add a second in the 67th minute. Zaragoza's deflected effort extended Bayern's lead before Andor got us a goal back, but unfortunately it was too little too late, with the game finishing 3-2. The board obviously felt we needed strengthening as they increased our transfer budget, but of course things wouldn't be that simple. Comenencia's contract renewal hadn't gone through due to the squad's wage cap already being at its limit, meaning we wouldn't be able to register any new players without unregistering someone else first. We still had December's games to try and improve our position before we even thought about transfers though, but losing 3-1 to Athletic Club weren't exactly the result we were looking for to turn our fortunes around. Even more of a kick in the nuts when our former loanee Lozano scored 2 of the goals. We at least won our next Champions League match, beating Lyon 4-1 convincingly with goals from Akama, Gui and Ugochukwu, earning us another valuable 3 points. We'd also got another win, this time off the pitch, as Sissoko declared he was happy to stay, so that was at least one less issue to worry about. That was our last win for a while though, as we lost to Espanyol, Betis and Levante, meaning we were heading into the winter break on the back of some terrible results. Maybe it was the lack of first-team signings in the summer, or maybe it was just a culmination of player issues that we hadn't solved. Either way, we had to improve, so I got to work on fixing some of those squad dynamics issues as well as looking for reinforcements. Summer signing Prostegard weren't happy with his game time, so I offered him out on loan to ease his concerns. We accepted offers from Girona and Espanyol, with him joining the latter. We also offered Beto out for transfer as he was no longer required, before making an offer for Leverkusen midfielder Francis Onyeka in a deal worth £11.5 million. I'd also made a tactical change in hope of a fresh start, but the first test of it would be in the Super Copa against Real Madrid, and it's fair to say it didn't pass the test. Not that the tactics were to blame for the first goal, or even the third one. And by the 5th goal, it was clear to see Brummans hadn't exactly covered himself in glory as he let another slide under his grasp in a 5-1 defeat. The cup exits didn't stop there either, as we got knocked out of the Copa del Rey with a 3-2 loss to Las Palmas, which probably weren't the worst thing in the world, leaving us to focus on the league and the Champions League. We did beat Mallorca 3-0 before confirming the signing of Onyeka, suggesting things were looking up. Until we lost again, that was. This time with a dismal performance in a 4-1 defeat to Osasuna. The squad dynamics were starting to look a little better though, with just 4 issues now remaining, and I look to improve them further by hiring intermediaries to move on Bernasconi. He could fetch up to 2.5 million, which weren't too bad considering we'd signed him on a free transfer. I also offered Karabakh out to try and move him on before holding a team meeting to try and improve morale. That chat seemed to have done the trick as we came from behind twice in a 2-2 draw against Chelsea before we comfortably beat Cordoba 4-0. Bernasconi scored the last goal of the game, which turned out to be his final contribution for us, with him leaving to join Levante for 2.1 million. We also accepted a loan offer for Karabakh from Sevilla, potentially solving another of our issues before making an offer for a replacement wing-back in Thomason. With all the work we were doing to fix our dynamics, things were finally starting to look up on the pitch too, as we won in the Champions League, this time beating Feyenoord 2-0 with goals from Ndor and Makama. And that win meant we'd miraculously finished in 11th place of the league phase, advancing through to the knockout rounds. I decided to make some more additions and help things keep moving in the right direction. Firstly, former Chelsea midfielder Cesar Casadei was available for free after leaving Torino, so I offered him a contract to provide backup in midfield. Karabek's deal to join Sevilla was then confirmed before we completed the deals for both Casadei and Thomason. Another midfielder became available, and I thought it was too good to turn down, so we also signed Carney Chukwuemeka for just 2.9 million, which resulted in Casadei expressing concern just 4 hours after joining. Not ideal. So we looked much better at the end of January than we did at the start. We've made some quality new additions with Onyeka and Chukwuemeka both joining, as well as fixing a few of our squad dynamics issues. The question was now, could we put a run together and get ourselves up the league table? Well, a score draw with Sociedad followed by a 5-0 demolition of Villarreal was certainly a positive start to the second half of the season, with Onyeka scoring in both games. We also found out our opponent for the first knockout round in the Champions League, and it turns out it was the team that we just faced in Feyenoord. With the first leg away from home, as long as we avoided a big defeat, I was confident of us advancing through to the next round. But it was us that took the lead after some good work from new signing Onyeka, whose cross took a massive deflection, with Bergwijn putting past his own goalkeeper. However, it was Bergwijn who got Feyenoord back level, making up for his earlier own goal, before Vandenberg put them in front with a strike from distance. Thankfully for us though, Ndor's through ball found Tierno Barry, who buried his chance as we shared the spoils in the first leg. We drew 0-0 with Girona back in the league before welcoming Feyenoord to the Riazor for the second leg, and this game went much smoother as Ugachukwu opened the scoring for us before Mark Gui finished brilliantly to add a second. Chukwuemeka then found Barry, who made it 3 before a glimmer of hope for Feyenoord as Valente banged this free kick in. But it was nothing more than a consolation as new signing Casadei and Chukwuemeka combined for a fourth, with us progressing through to the next round with a 5-3 aggregate win. And our reward for that? Paris Saint-Germain. Although, to be fair, looking at the other round of 16 ties, there weren't exactly many easier options. Ugachukwu then decided to spoil the mood by joining Mamba in wanting to move to a bigger club. I told him he had a release clause, to which he replied the clause was unrealistic, which is funny because it was him that added it in the first place. And for reference, it's 31.5 million, which I don't think is that unrealistic. Atleti went full Stoke City as they beat us 3-1 with 2 Route 1 goals for Siddiqui Sheriff. Surprisingly though, Captain Cups had seen enough to drop his concern about us underperforming in the league, removing another of our squad dynamic issues. We then faced Barcelona in the league with Ferran Torres giving them the lead, before Casadei scored to get us back level. Mamba's cross was then headed home by Barry to give us the lead before Torres scored his second of the day to once again level the game up as we finished 2-2. But continuing our tough run of fixtures, we had our Champions League round of 16 tie against Paris Saint-Germain up next. Could we cause a major upset and beat the French giants? No, is the simple answer. Dembele found Zaire Emery to open the scoring, before Kvaratskhelia's deflected effort added a second in the 40th minute. The second half weren't much better as Dembele's effort was stolen by Erling Haaland as he added a third for a comfortable victory. Confidence was clearly low after that hiding as we lost again, this time 2-1 to Sevilla thanks to some quality goalkeeping before facing Paris Saint-Germain again for the second leg. I weren't expecting much in Paris, I just hoped we could maybe gain some confidence with a good performance. However, that quickly went out the window as we gave them a penalty in the 21st minute for a foul on Haaland. It was Haaland who stepped up, going straight down the middle to give PSG the lead, before Asano Drago found Kvaratskhelia for a second. Drago then found Haaland for his second before getting a goal of his own in a man-of-the-match performance, as Paris Saint-Germain went on to win 4-1 and dump us out of the Champions League. I didn't expect to get past Paris Saint-Germain, so I'm not too worried by our exit. I just hope it hasn't destroyed our confidence, as we've still got plenty of work left to do this season as we look to finish the league on a high. And we got off to the perfect start, with Carney Chukwuemeka scoring a brace as we comfortably beat Valencia 4-0, followed by the second Galatian derby of the season. Mark Gui's emphatic finish set us on our way to an impressive 5-1 win, with goals from Onyeka, Barry and Chukwuemeka, and another for Mark Gui. With those wins, we were sat in 12th place with 9 games remaining. But with an 11-point gap to Villarreal in 7th, any hope of salvaging European football from a pretty disappointing domestic season appeared to be all but gone. Comenencia getting a stress fracture in his foot certainly didn't help the situation, but at least youngster Vallejo was having a good season on loan, winning Player of the Month, as well as being named in the Next Gen list. We added another 3 points with a top performance from new wing-back Thomason, who scored twice and assisted one in a 4-0 victory over Elche. However, any chance of us getting European football next season were gone after losing to Racing before Madrid destroyed us 6-1. We at least got another win, beating Valladolid 3-0 with another goal and 2 more assists from Thomason, before a 2-2 draw with Athletic Club. Barry decided to finally turn up as he scored a hat-trick against Espanyol, before assisting Gui in a 1-1 draw against Betis. Ugachukwu then doubled down on his earlier message about his desire to leave, as he handed in a transfer request, before we got one over on former wing-back Bernasconi, beating his new side Levante 3-0. And it turns out he weren't the only casualty of that game, as Barry would miss the last game of the season, spraining his ankle ligaments. Cups would be joining him on the sideline too, as he'd fractured his collarbone after a heavy fall in training. In more positive news, Mark Gui was happy to stay after an upturn in results, and Mambwa had been named Young Player of the Year. And we took that positivity into the final day, with an away trip to Mallorca where Mambwa's cross was volleyed into the net inside 2 minutes from Chukwuemeka. And then, somewhere in that crowd, Mark Gui was apparently pushed, resulting in a penalty for us. That, for some reason, Cassidy took. And missed. He did at least make up for it though, doubling our lead in the second half with a lovely finish from range. Dominic pulled one back for Mallorca, but it turned out to be nothing more than a consolation, as we won our final game of the season 2-1. So with that, we ended up finishing 9th in the league, which I can't be mad at with how poor we were at the start of the season. And for the second year running, Makama had finished as our top goal scorer with 19 goals, closely followed by Gui with 18, and maybe I was too harsh on Barry when I said he'd finally turned up, as he actually finished with 15. New signing Chukwuemeka had done pretty well too since his arrival in January, with 8 goals and 9 assists, as well as Thomason, who finished with 13 goal involvements. Looks like we were getting some more of the Almala money back too, as the board had given us 16 million for our budget, as well as announcing their plans to build a new stadium. Hopefully we wouldn't need to spend that budget on a new midfielder, as Al Fayha had declared their interest in Engels. So although we had a really good season in Europe, domestically we definitely took a few steps backwards. We at least salvaged a decent league position, but unfortunately we won't have European football next year. Hopefully we can still attract some quality players, as we prepare to go again next season in our efforts to take Deportivo back to the top of Spanish football. But to see if we improve or continue to fall, you'll have to tune into the next episode. And if you've enjoyed this one, do me a favour, hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.